proportion of deaths that are attributed to intentional homicide. And so one of the issues that was raised is that data are collected on homicides, but there was nothing like intentional homicides. How do you measure intentional homicide? So the countries did not have the capacity to measure that, so they were just producing information on homicides. And for a few others, data are available, but the computed indicators did not take account of gender, so which means disaggregated data was a problem. Now, we try to see how administrative data can be used to close the gender-specific SDG data gaps. And we found out that 63%, that is 34 out of the 54 indicators, can be generated from administrative data sources. That is those with data gaps. Those indicators that were found to have data gaps, 34 of them could be generated from administrative data source. And examples are the indicator 1.B.1, indicator 4.5, 4.A.1, 5.1.A, and 5.5.1. There are a number of these, but these are some of the ones I could talk about. And then we also had we also saw that the remaining 20 of the 54 indicators can be obtained exclusively from non-administrative sources. And so focusing on those that can be generated from administrative sources, we saw that 14 can be generated solely from administrative sources, 10 from administrative sources complemented with data from other sources. And then we also had 10 from that could be computed directly from administrative sources or from other sources. So administrative sources served as an alternative source of data. And then we looked at the 45 gender-specific indicators across the the 45 gender-specific indicators that could be generated from, with data gaps that could be generated from administrative sources. We found out that of the 45, 28 or 62% could be generated exclusively from administrative sources in combination with other sources. That's 3, 9, and 6 could be generated as an alternative source of data. The difference between this and that is that we are looking at all the 54 indicators that can be generated from administrative sources. And we are saying that of the 54, 14 can be generated solely from administrative sources, 10 from administrative sources complemented with data from other sources. And the 10 could serve as an alternative source. Administrative source could serve as an alternative source of data. But if we look at those with data gaps, then this is what we have. Now, which actors are involved in the compilation of administrative data for monitoring the SDGs? We realize that in all the study countries, ministries, departments, and other state agencies play a very important role in the collection and management of administrative data. And in some of the countries, the statistical departments or statistical units of specific ministries assume the responsibility of compiling and publishing statistics from administrative data, censuses, and surveys. And then in others, the NSOs were responsible for reporting such statistics using the National SDG Indicator Framework. So what types of data are generally collected by these MDAs to monitor SDGs? So we have information on a variety of topics. So we have social protection, social welfare, education, health, remittances, CRVS, that's civil registration and vital statistics, youth livelihood programs, helpline, child abuse cases, women in decision-making positions, and so on. So the data types varied across countries. Now, we also try to find out the availability of guidelines and quality frameworks for administrative data collection. And we found out that Rwanda has a framework for gender statistics in general, production in general, but they don't have specific guidelines for administrative data collection. And then for Uganda, they have developed general guidelines for producing quality statistics. Tanzania has draft guidelines for preparing regional profiles from administrative data, and they also have quality assurance framework. In Malawi, we don't have any specific guidelines or data quality assurance frameworks. For Kenya, we have the ISO guidelines that outlines general procedures for the production of statistics. So that may be applicable to the administrative data collection. And for Ethiopia, there are no guidelines, but the Central Statistical Agency has developed national administrative data management guidelines in collaboration with UNICEF for administrative data collection. So you see, most of the countries are making a lot of effort to ensure that we make the production of data from administrative sources more efficient, and so that they can generate data for statistical purposes. Now we look at the quality of existing administrative data with particular reference to the CRVS systems. We realize that CRVS system was identified as a preferred source of data for many of the SDG indicators. If you look at the metadata for the SDG indicators, CRVS is indicators. So any well-functioning CRVS system has to register all births, deaths, and other vital events, marriages. And so it helps to provide legal identity to all children born in the country. It helps to compile and disseminate vital statistics, including cause of death. And so we try to assess quality, focusing on two vital events within the CRVS system, and these are births and deaths. And the quality dimensions that we looked at are relevance, accuracy, comparability, accessibility, interpretability, and timeliness of data. So for relevance, we are referring to the degree to which the data serves to address user needs in terms of completeness, appropriateness of the content, and use of appropriate concepts. And in terms of completeness, the WHO indicates that coverage of birth and death registration should be greater than 80% for the data to be considered complete and reliable. So in Kenya, for example, we found out that birth registration was 66.9%. For Malawi, it was 67%, and so on. So it indicates that we are still not yet. Those were the high levels that we noted, so we are still not there yet. We still need to work very hard to improve coverage. In terms of accuracy, we are talking about the degree to which the data correctly estimates or describes the quantities or characteristics that are designed to measure the indicator. And we also looked at comparability, which relates to the data sets to which identical definitions and concepts and data collection, processing, and analytical procedures have been applied. So And then for accessibility, we are talking about where data are available to the users, the degree to which data are available to users. And then interpretability, we are looking at data or indicators that can be read and understood, or and in terms of data, can they be used and analyzed? Do they have clear definitions of concepts? Is the target population very well defined? Are the variables and terminology used in the study easy to understand? And does the study describe the limitations associated with it? And in terms of timeliness, we are looking at timely access to data that can enhance policy interventions, as we know that delayed access to data make them less useful. So we found out that for all the countries that we studied, the main problem associated with the CRVS data was the completeness and the accuracy. As we had completeness because when we measured the levels of coverage, they were not up to the standard. And in terms of accuracy, we realized that some were reporting errors in the data that were being processed and then we also had issues with timeliness because data were not being submitted regularly on time to the centers where data analysis was taking place. In terms of dissemination of administrative data, the countries use different types of dissemination practices. So some used national dissemination portals and institutional websites to disseminate the data. We had also global gender data portals that countries reported to, like the WHO gender data portal. We also had some of them providing the data upon request. Others had publications in newsletters, institutional newsletters, national reports, magazines. Others disseminated their data through workshops, seminars, conferences. Others through policy briefs. And then there were also periodic releases of data through media houses. And we also had, there's also the data portal that is being established by ADB, and hopefully countries will be asked to provide data so that data can easily be shared globally and within the region. So what are the barriers to production, uptake, and use of gender-specific data from administrative sources? A number of barriers were mentioned, including poor data quality, delayed and irregular data production. We also had non-aggregation or inadequate disaggregation, non-disaggregation or inadequate disaggregation of data, limited understanding of the importance of gender statistics, limited statistical literacy and access to data, poor coordination, and limited use of harmonized terms, concepts, and standards. We also had people reporting the non-application of technology and internationally accepted statistical methodologies, and some didn't have indicator frameworks that could support the production of gender-specific statistics. So all these were issues that were being experienced by the administrative data producers that were interviewed. Now, what are our conclusions? We have a couple of conclusions. We are saying that administrative data systems have very great potential for generating data for monitoring SDG 5 and other gender-specific SDG indicators. And we are saying that the SDG indicators with data gaps are generally those for which data do not exist or countries face methodological challenges with their computation. Therefore, we need to expand existing databases or explore ways of increasing the technical capacities of the administrative data producers in order to help them generate these indicators. The conclusion also is that one of the conclusions is that administrative data in the study countries are mainly derived from routine operations of MDs. Now, in terms of the quality of administrative data, some of the stakeholders indicated that the data were comprehensive and met almost all the administrative data requirements. And they indicated that the data produced are not complete and called for strengthening these data systems. We found that in all the study countries, the administrative data managers were confronted with capacity challenges, and this affected the functioning and timely production of quality data from administrative data systems. Many barriers were reported, as I've already said, delayed or irregular production. So these have already been indicated in the earlier slide. Now, let's look at some of the best practices that we observed. We found out that based on administrative data, Rwanda increased school enrollment and participation in economic activities, and this helped to reduce poverty among the population. Uganda, on its side, developed national gender policy, which was launched in 2016 based on administrative data that were published by the that were published within the country. For Tanzania, they looked at the yield per hectare of agricultural land cultivated by men and women, and found out that women were at a disadvantage, and so they put in interventions to increase women's agricultural output. Malawi, based on administrative data from schools and other relevant institutions, developed a national gender policy. Kenya also instituted laws that helped to improve women's inheritance as far as And Ethiopia, I can't see very well. In Ethiopia, because of the color. In Ethiopia, the country developed a women's policy and development package, and this helped to create participation of women in all levels, to increase participation of women at all levels of the economic sphere. So there were a number of practices that were being implemented by countries based on data that had been produced and also published. And so this means that whatever we have, whatever we produce as administrative data managers, or as NSS, or as NSOs, the important thing is to ensure that these are published or made publicly accessible to people and to especially the policy makers, so that something good will come out of it. So we came up with a number of recommendations. These are a lot, so I'll just go through a few. We had recommendations for 4 groups of people: the UN Women, its partners, the countries, and the NSOs. And so for UN Women, we are asking them to sensitize countries to fully integrate gender dimensions into the data production systems. We are also saying that they should provide technical assistance and financial support for the production and dissemination of gender-sensitive data from administrative sources, that they should raise awareness on gender statistics, and also partner with other relevant regional stakeholders to track national level gender-specific indicators. To the regional bodies and international partners, we are asking them to support development of national guidelines for the production of gender statistics by both administrative and non-administrative data producers. They should promote the regular allocation of financial and human resources to strengthening administrative data collection systems. They should help build the capacity of staff of administrative and non-administrative data systems, among others. We also looked at the study countries, and we are saying that they should provide funding to help in acquiring infrastructure and tools for data gathering, documentation, storage, security, processing, analysis, dissemination, and archiving of data produced by administrative data systems. And then they should establish statistical units in all MDAs. For some of the countries, the MDAs did not have any statistical units. So how would the data that they were gathering as part of their routine activities be useful to the country? We are also asking that they recruit personnel with the skills that are necessary for administrative data collection, management, and analysis. They should develop protocols and policies to guide gender-sensitive data production, and also provide regular training for personnel that are responsible for administrative data production, and this particularly on new data, on new methodologies that are needed to measure pertinent emerging gender issues. Now the NSOs, there are a number of recommendations that we made, but one of them is to build partnerships with users of, or relationships, strong relationships with users of gender-specific data, and create awareness of data needs and the processes of data production, so people will understand and appreciate the work that is being done and contribute where necessary. We are also saying that they should implement national strategies for the development of statistics that ensure that data administrative systems are fully gender responsive through the use of gender-sensitive data collection tools. Some, we realize that their national strategies have expired, and so they were in the process of updating them, but it's taking too long. We need to work on these quickly so that we can ensure that these are included, administrative data systems and gender responsive indicators are included in the data collection that is being done. We also talked about building strong coordination and cooperation with MDAs to ensure harmonization of methodologies and data production and management processes to ensure timely production of indicators. We also talked about establishing quality assurance mechanisms at both the national and subnational levels of the responsible institutions that are in charge of administrative data collection. We also talked about conducting periodic data quality assessment. This is key, so that the administrative data that are produced for the computation of the indicators, we are sure that the quality is very good and can be relied on. And we said they should provide leadership in the development of national SDG indicator frameworks to support the monitoring and evaluation of gender-specific indicators. The other point was that the NSOs should collaborate with key administrative data producers in the NSS to publish gender-sensitive reports. If you collect the data and they are sitting in the on your desktop or whatever, it doesn't make sense. It's not useful to anybody, and then would have lost out as a country. So we need to work with them, especially those that lack capacity to publish the data that they collect. So that's it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Philomena. Okay, now I can't blame it on this mic, but I didn't hear the applause as much as should have. If I was going to rate the way you clapped by the way you enjoyed the presentation, the first one will score 0. But the second time, I think you caught up and realized you really enjoyed the presentation. Thank you so much, Philomena, for packaging what looks like a number of months' work and what is in a 70 document within a 45 minutes, if not even less, presentation. So now we've come to a very important point of our gathering here in the seminar. We are going to officially launch the study itself. We are going to have a photo session with it. Oh, somebody said yes. Who is agreeing? I want to see if it's an NSO. Is it you? Good. It's an NSO who says yes. And then we have the copy, and we will have a 1-hour discussion on the study itself, questions on the presentation, and that will be facilitated by my colleague, Jack. So I am going to call on our colleague from the office who is representing the Deputy Regional Director right now, Madam Jebe Foster, to launch the book, and she will then call those who should hold the book and take a picture, and of course we will all do the same. And after which we will then have a discussion on the study itself. So please keep your questions. We're going to have an hour of discussion and interaction, and the recommendations that we have, what we want to do with them. We want to be sure that we get your views. Of course, this discussion will not be about how we improve the reports. That's done. It will be mostly about what can we do with the recommendations, the way forward. Which additional recommendations do we find the recommendations relevant? Which additional ones do we want to do? How can we expand them? That's the kind of discussion that Jack will facilitate. So, Madam Jebe Foster, you're called upon to do the launch of the study. Can I block this? Oh, I thought someone was doing it. It has a cover. Oh, you are. There is an age gap between the people who are very technologically savvy.
Voila.
You see? Nice blue. Okay.
You know that's how to do well.
You see?
Put something on top. Put a bottle on top. Okay, a book.
Yeah. So there's something about technology, but there's something about
It's complementary.
Okay, we've done the technical aspects and so on. Now I want to do a formal launch of this report. I'm standing here on behalf of UN Women, but then this report does not belong to UN Women alone. It belongs to all the stakeholders. And then the major stakeholders are the statistical offices. So I want all those statistical offices that are represented here to please come forward and stand with me as I launch this report. I think we have Kenya, we have Tanzania, Rwanda, and Ethiopia. Malawi send their apologies, they cannot be here. But all representatives from national statistical offices, and they will take this picture and say you are part of this, and we'll see what you're doing in your countries. So please come and stand with me. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just looking at the gender composition. I'm doing my own analysis. Okay, this report has already received a commitment by 6 national statistical institutes who are willing to use it as an entry point for institutionalizing administrative data for monitoring and reporting on gender-related SDGs. As has been mentioned in the report, all stakeholders, including United Nations agencies, civil society, international and local NGOs, media, universities, academia, research institutes, think tanks, individual statistical and gender advocates, bilateral agencies, development partners, and donors, among others, are encouraged to leverage the opportunity presented by the report to increase advocacy and interventions on administrative data to complement other official statistics and fill in gender gaps and strengthen reporting on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. With this, okay. Shall we? No, I want the stakeholders. It's our report, all of us. Okay, with this, I now wish to officially launch the report on advancing administrative data sources for gender-related sustainable development goals. Thank you very much.
You will take a photo. You will take a group photo with the report, each of you holding the report.
Faris, could I have a copy? Where is it? That is. Yeah, copy.
Why are you putting me next to Philomena?
Let me use this.
No, come.
I'll take on the photo.
Please come back. Take the photo.
Okay.
Please come. Charles.
So everybody now.
Charles, Sadiq. We have one more. Charles, Sadiq. One more. And then everybody. No, anything. Of course. You will see it's very Yes. I invite everyone to please stand up. Okay, no, I thought you stay here. You stand here. And you can get all of us. As many of us. Thank you very much.
That explains it.
People are holding you and not smiling. The camera is not working.
Okay. So some will have to sit in front. Short ones, like Valentine, at the back.
From here you have to find out. Yeah. From here, you have to find a way to get to the bridge. Meduana. Smile, guys. All right, that's fine.
No problem.
Really inspiring, and I think that from here we are going to take the recommendations and the findings of this study forward in terms of implementing them at institutional level. So one of inviting the different stakeholders here is so that from this particular meeting you can be able to also complement the efforts by UN Women to implement and operationalize the findings and recommendations of this study.
Can I do quickly? Yes, okay. Now there's something I forgot. Thank you so much, Jack, that we needed to do. Just, I want you to please, just before I do that, how many of us know the Roman number 9? How do we write it? Huh? Roman number 9, how do you write it? So how do you change that 9 to a 6? Upside down? No. Outside. Add an S to the IX, you get the number 6. You got the joke. So Roman number 9 is IX. If you add an S at the beginning, you get the number 6. So therefore, I want you to take your pens. You go to page 15 of the book. And the reason why I had to tell about Roman 9 and 6 is we wrote the book in Roman number. When they were translated to numerals, there was a slight error. And that error is significant and we need it changed. Page 15. On the left column, the third paragraph, are you with me? You'll see the last sentence. No, last 3 lines. There is tier 3 indicator. Have you found it? That should be tier 2. So just scratch the 3 and put the 2. So it's page 15, the column on the left, the third paragraph, the third sentence. The last 3 sentences, tier 2, put tier 3 indicators. That's a serious, it's tier 3, do 2. It's 3. That's a serious error because we know the difference between tier 2 and tier 3. Yeah, so it's tier 2 it should be. And then, did you get it? There's some tier 3, it should be 2. That's it. Okay. And then on page 26, 2-6. On the right-hand side, which is section 3.10, you have bullet points, right? On the right-hand side, the second bullet point says non-aggregation. Of course, we don't mean that. Non-disaggregation. So just do the DIS. On page 26, the right-hand side of the document, there are 4 bullet points. The second bullet point says non-aggregation or inadequate disaggregation of data. It should be non-disaggregation or inadequate disaggregation of data. So the data may be not completely disaggregated. It's fine, it follows. I think the heading is really important. Last one, page 27. On your right-hand side of the page, the first bullet point there, this is a minor one. These factors, that is non-application of technology and internationally accepted or nationally updated statistical methodologies. These factors in data production and management processes and non-use of internationally, LY only. Internationally, it says international. Did we see it? Yeah, that's it. So we thought those are significant changes. We're going to reflect them on the rest of the other copies that we will then reprint and produce, but we didn't want you living here thinking we meant tier 2 when actually, or tier 3 when it was supposed to be tier 2. Thank you so much. Again, as you see, it's very easy to change Roman figure 9 to 6. That's why some of these errors will happen even after you've printed the document. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Fatmata. And again, apologies, colleagues. I was telling Fatmata that even, when I was doing my PhD, it was reviewed by over 6 professors. And when the last day when I'd submitted it, I still found 1, 2 typos, and I was wondering where they were. Even after I went through a technical editor who really looked through it, the professors looked through it. So these are errors that we found yesterday evening when we were now sort of giving it a last eye. And of course, they will all be corrected in the virtual version that is going to be on our website and also in the other print versions. So we just printed just a few copies which were to be used for purposes of this particular seminar. And once again, apologies. So let's then move to a session where we want to now interact with our colleague who just did the presentation. I know that I sent this report in soft copy to all colleagues, but also I know that from the presentation was adequately well done. We could have certain questions, clarifications, inputs that can be able to feed into how we can be able to sort of accelerate progress towards institutionalizing administrative data within the NSOs and particularly within the framework of monitoring and reporting for gender-related SDGs. So I know that you could be having any inputs, any questions in whichever manner, please. I want to give this opportunity so that then we can be able to see how we can respond to them and also how we can be able to take this forward to ensure that this is agenda that we have created a discourse in Africa in terms of accelerating progress. So any questions are welcome. And I would start with Rogers, please.
Thank you, Jack. Just on minor, basically, interventions, in terms of how can we take the process forward. And I think some of the things are very important, but just to highlight some of them, because I think we all know that the SDGs are indivisible. And I think the overarching theme of the SDGs is to ensure that no one is left behind, and that we should reach the perfect extent. And in that, I think statistics is key for us to understand. complexity actually means that it's quite important for countries to actually set up coordination structures. And these coordination structures will be involved, the development partners, civil society, and so on. And because these coordination structures are quite important, they are quite important in even identifying the gaps in the financing of SDGs, the gaps in the monitoring of SDGs, and also going forward, what needs to be the coalitions you need to address even the data gaps which we are talking about. And countries who have done well in terms of monitoring SDGs, even in terms of even the reports they presented to the high level political forum, they have actually had this coordination structure. And one country which comes to mind is actually Colombia, which has got quite a robust coordination structure, which is actually chaired by the president of the high level. So I think to me, it's also important this coordination structure that we should always even in our advocacy, we also bring in these best practices, this coordination structure within the realm of South-South lending. Then I think also what is important is also in the advocacy. It's also this thing of government actually we need also to bring this advocacy before in terms of government, to make sure that they invest resources in statistics. Because statistics, most budgets, if you look at government budgets in Africa, the resources which are given to statistics, they are very limited, and most of the time it's even after. And most statistical organizations in Africa are funded by donors. And when these donors are funding the production of statistics, they actually make you collect the statistics which they need themselves. So it's incumbent upon government to also invest money in statistics, in the production of statistics. Because to me, statistics is a quantity of trust. It's a quantity of trust between government and its citizens. And it's also important in terms of even government monitoring this government program. And when it monitors this government program, it also has a feedback loop in terms of evidence-based policy making. So I think it's quite important to me that also we need also to ensure in our advocacy the importance of government investing their resources in the production of statistics, the analysis of the statistics, and so on. So I think to me, I think this I totally should highlight, these 2 points. And of course, I think going forward, we actually need to deepen this administrative data to actually ensure to identify who are being left behind. Because in most cases, it's anecdotal evidence. Just say, oh, these are the people who are left behind. But we need actually robust data which can help us identify these people who are being left behind. And those people who are being left behind, what deprivation are they facing? Because that actually will even inform you to target the deprivation, because in most cases, of course, we target wrongly the deprivation which they faces. So to me, I think it may be important to even try to localize this issue of administrative data on a local scale, particularly in the marginalized areas. For instance, in the Kenyan case, we know if you go up north, the degree of marginalization is much higher. How can we localize this so that we can even inform even the county governments to target the deprivations which these people being left behind faces? With those few remarks, I thank you. No, I'm Roger Sliwai. I work for UNDP as an economics advisor.
Yes, I just important because you can get the inputs and you can then get the perspective of sustainability. Let me take her and then I'll come back to you. And then I will come to Beatrice. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Joy. Indicators of it in the SDGs, is she really concerned with. So when I took this booklet, I quickly opened it and I found that information, it was actually here. But then now I'm seeing, like, for example, in Kenya, I'm seeing like most of the data gaps that many other countries might have, especially on SDG Tier 1 indicators, we seem not to have them. But me being a Kenyan, I'm also concerned about data management and handling. If you talk about on who is being left behind, you cannot help but think about the rural woman in the rural areas. And who handles administrative data? And administrative data is handled mainly at the chief's office and those local government offices, which are extremely manual. And all land disputes are sorted out by the chief. It's a chief who knows how many women are being disinherited when their husbands die. How many cases are brought about women? How many women are being chased from their families or are being beaten by their husbands? Because they resolve all that. But then how do they handle that data? Again, you talk about the women giving birth, the traditional midwives. How many midwives are there in the first place? It's only the chief who knows. How many are trained? It's only the chief who has those records. So my point is, we should also think about data standards of data management and handling, and administrative data management and handling, in a way that we can purposely inform policy and we can quickly get on what is happening to women and boys and children and men. And from that now we can deduct where is the deprivation and what policies do we need to put in place. So data management at the local levels is very important.
Let me get input from our colleague, and then we'll come to British and come to Kenya.
I'm Isabel Schmidt. I'm a statistical advisor at the regional office here at the Women. Thank you very much for a very interesting and comprehensive report, Philomena. I think moving forward, this is going to be really the basis of our statistical support work in the region. So this report, I think, is really very important and timely. I would like to know, you mentioned at the beginning that you felt that legislative frameworks impacts on administrative data sets. Do you perhaps have some examples of how countries leverage legislation to actually improve their administrative statistical systems?
Get one more, and then we'll have responses from Philomena, and then we'll look at that. I think I have given to Beatrice, and then we'll go to her, then we come back to you. I'm advised to use this mic for purposes of sound.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I think in a way, Rogers has touched on what I wanted to ask. I'm just wondering, in doing this research, we do know that there are a number of agencies that actually do collect the data. I come from a humanitarian perspective, and I know that, for instance, IOM, UNHCR, and a number of UN agencies and international partners actually do collect the data. I don't know whether you were able to reach to them. Were they also the sources of information that you collected? And if that's the case, maybe what are some of the key gaps you also observed from that perspective? I think maybe, I know that a number of countries that you covered are not necessarily within, the humanitarian kind of setup. I'm just thinking of countries such as maybe Somalia and South Sudan, where even just the normal statistics are very hard even to come by. Maybe as one of the recommendations going forward that we'll be discussing in the afternoon, how do we support capacities of different stakeholders, whether it's government, whether it's international NGOs, to actually collect, data that can be useful in terms of monitoring SDGs and other development aspects. So those are my two kind of comments.
Complementary inputs, and then we go for our next one.
Yeah, I think I'll respond to the last question first. In terms of the agencies that I covered, I know administrative data is collected by so many agencies. but I limited myself to ministries, departments, and agencies. And even within that, I just looked at those collecting information on CRVS systems and the gender ministries, because the time period for the research was very short, and also the resources to complete the work were not so huge. So we had to make some cutoffs. And so at this point, I would say that we did not cover anything on humanitarian issues. Even though the gender ministries did give us information about some of the data that they gather. We assume that most of the data that are being compiled by the country will go to the NSOs, or will go to the gender ministries. So we limited our study to that. And I quite understand the concern about the countries that are facing conflicts. We really need to support them, because even the normal statistics that are generated by the NSOs have challenges because of funding issues. And so we need to really pay attention to them. In terms of countries that are leveraging their legal documents or legal frameworks to influence administrative data systems, I can't think of an example right now, but I know that in Ghana, I can't think of an example in the countries that I studied. But in Ghana, for example, we have a couple of administrative data producers that are using their legal frameworks to influence the collection of data and to influence policy decisions. The key ones are education, health, and so they are really, and always also cooperating with the National Statistical Office to conduct surveys or to generate indicators from the data that they themselves produce. In Ghana, we have a very strong linkages with these two systems. So it's helping, but in a way, one of the problems that we are facing as a country is the fact that if you take the health ministry, for example, they will work with you and they will work with you to generate the data, but they don't want you to have access to the microdata. So they will not release the microdata because they see they have legal frameworks that limits them in sharing the data with other organizations, which we think our legal framework supersedes theirs, but they are also insisting that their legal framework supersedes. So there's this conflict going on, and we are trying to resolve it. Since we started working on the CRVS system together, we are trying to discuss. And so they are talking about need to change their legal frameworks to give them the leverage to be able to share the microdata, which the NSOs need very strongly to be able to respond to the data needs of users who come requesting for certain indicators that are not generally produced in the publications that are put on across in terms of sharing internationally and on their websites.
We'll take another round, and we note that some of the complementary inputs around data governance and what our colleague Rogers gave are also really very useful in terms of taking this forward. So let me come here. Let me come to Ethiopia, then I come to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Flomima, for this very useful research output. But in terms of way forward and in terms of really improving the quality of data, its reliability, representativeness, and all that, I think we also need to take it further than using just email communication, to really go to the site and be able to collect information and concrete data, and not only rely on key informants interviews, because those people may not have the evidence and the facts at hand. You know, so this is something that we need to invest in the future in terms of improving the quality of data and its representativeness. One other thing that I would like to share in terms of different setup. In Ethiopian case, the Central Statistics Agency wouldn't, force, sectors to provide administrative data, and it's not, administrative data also doesn't go to Central Statistics Agency, but it goes to Planning and Development Commission. So there is no legal backing even for CSA to enforce sectors to provide administrative data. The other thing is, when it comes to SDGs, it's not, in our case, it's not the Central Statistics Agency that's mandated to oversee that. It's the Planning and Development Commission, which is not part of a discussion, a discussant in this research output. So in the future, we also need to see different setup, different structures in different countries, because it varies from country to country. So I believe we are missing a lot on Ethiopia because, they weren't trigger us to further invest in doing further research, especially action-oriented and policy-oriented research that could enforce government to take it up. For example, for Ethiopia, we could propose that there should be a legal backing for CSA, to be able to enforce other sectors to provide administrative data, because they are the ones with expertise on methodology and all that, to be able to improve on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I know that the NSOs will also have even a good opportunity in the afternoon to share particular examples and how they have been able to leverage opportunities for admin data in their countries in the afternoon. So let me give her, and then I will come back to you.
Hi, my name is Kevin. So I was just trying to maybe brush through this report and also alongside what you mentioned, but I'm not seeing anything about persons living with disability, PWD, and probably how they can advance administrative sources of data. Probably, for example, I know, let me take case and scenario, Kibera slums in Kenya. There is groups of women who are living with disability, but they do business. So probably maybe in future advancements, persons living with disability could be a critical component to be captured in. Like even in the room, Jack, I'm not seeing any representative from the PWD. Thank you.
Thank you so much. She was next, but she has a comparative, then I will do it.
Yes, only a few things. As my input is also on methodology, and I was explaining through my email many times to Dr. Philomena that the approach, the way the data is collected is not robust, and you cannot talk about 6 countries like from email perspective, and like from the methodology. She used the key informant interviews, but how many key informant the response rate, and then she should have visited the sectors who produce administrative data. It's not NSOs that cover all the burdens in the sectors about the administrative data. So the limitations mentioned are not simple limitations, so I think we have to use with the report with considering all these limitations, and with the country case studies. I don't know how she studied about Ethiopia. Like for all the 6 countries, there is case studies for these countries, and then what are the procedures she went through for case studies. If it's for Ethiopia, I want to know somehow the case study was done. And with regarding the guidelines, we don't have gender, with Ethiopia, we don't have gender mainstreaming guideline in the national statistical system, just specific only to gender, but we have data quality assessment framework, and recently we have produced national administrative data management guideline. But here, the way it is mentioned in the presentation is conflicting. There is no guideline, but it says CAC has developed a guideline. So the limitations all I am mentioning is due to the methodology, and it should not be this way. The study should be, like we have conducted one assessment regarding SDG monitoring capacity for Ethiopia, and then also Uganda and Rwanda was also part of this assessment. And for Ethiopia, the consultant came physically to all the relevant sectors and based with NSOs, and then we came with a strong recommendation. A country-specific recommendations is required. We cannot speak about the 6 country NSOs because the 6 countries NSOs might not be at the same level. So we need country-specific recommendations and specific observations. So it should be improved in the future.
Thank you so much. Let me give Esther, then I think we can take 2 more before.
Thank you, Jack. I think this is a good step, and we can definitely build from this. And it emphasizes that the reason why we never got to get far with the MDG 3 was because we don't have data. And it still can tell we still don't have. And I think for me, this is where I see this report taking us, emphasizing that a lot. I don't know, I just want to hear more about what is the dichotomy between administrative generated data and citizen generated data. Like, you know, and as you were presenting, I was thinking, and when Joy talked about who has the data on inheritance rights in Kenya is a chief. I have spent 25 years in this country working with women living in communities, grassroots women. I can tell you the massive amount of data that women have on who was thrown out in their communities. If there is anything the HIV and AIDS group defeated all of us in development is emphasizing and using the data that was collected by community health workers. And that is really what helped us to deal with HIV. So I feel like there's something we probably may need to tease out that in terms of terminology. And recently, the organization that I used to be, Roots Kenya, worked on a very small project. And it looked at the data on LAD that they could get from the administration, the official administration, and this is the LAD offices. And it was to look at what the issues of security of women's LAD tenure. And they went to the offices and they were able to get 100% of the data. Then they went back to the community and asked the communities, who do you think owns LAD? You know? And they correlated that data. You have no idea the difference in that data. So if seriously our issue is to use the information to invest more resources in dealing with gender inequality, I feel that we need to be more inclusive on what data that we will bring up front. And for me, it's been a discussion we've had for 6 years now. And I know it's a very, there is a lot of tension between official data and this other data, but I feel it's something, especially when we talk about gender, we really need to talk about, and I think UN Women sits in a very good position to keep defining and leading this process. I don't know for Kenya, and I always feel proud because I know our Kenya National Bureau of Statistics have been quite a bit ahead than many other, even from us who are Kenyan. We know that they've been very committed, but of course we know other institutions. The only thing that concerned me is to credit the inheritance law to the administrative data. And I'm thinking, if the women's rights organization were in this room, including who actually drafted the law, you know, and the amount of campaigning. So I just think that, yeah, it's information, it's good because we have the law, but crediting where did it come from, I went back, and because I've been in this movement for a long time. So it's something that even for research, we need always to involve broadly as many people as possible to consolidate reports. That's for me what it told me.
I know that you had also wanted. So let me give her, because she had raised her hand severally. Then I will come to you, Mitra. Then we can have a quick response. Oh, sorry. I'm leaving you behind. After this, I come there, please. My apologies.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Actually, I felt maybe we were being ignored, but I knew we had a session in the afternoon, so I thought maybe we can still raise our comments. I have perused through the report, and actually, for me, it's quite informative and an eye-opener. And there may be one or two things, very minor, that may not correctly present the Kenyan position, but otherwise, wholesomely, actually, it is something that I believe future it will be able to guide us as the NSO on how best to move forward. And having said that, I was just curious about some of the indicators that are in the report. And the way it is presented, it is as if NSOs are expected to actually report on those indicators. And I have one specific one, the international poverty line. Yet, as countries, we do choose who should report on some of the indicators based on national priority, based on international agreement, because we also have official custodian agencies at the international level, the global level, and based on that, sometimes it is not cost effective to actually duplicate efforts, so we leave the best agency to report. And we work together, and once they report, we actually use that data. They use our data to compute. So the way the report shows, in some, it will show that, okay, we don't have data, yet that is not actually the position, because as a country, we have mechanisms on how to get that reporting. So I was just a bit curious on some of the indicators, but wholesomely, I'm happy with the report.
Now the backup, then I'll come to you, because at least I have tried to balance. So can I just give them and then I give to you, please? So we'll just have two more and then we have quick responses. Sorry for...
Thank you. My name is Frida. Mine is a quick question. I come from Groots, Kenya. I'm just wondering, one is why the questionnaires were administered by email. I would want to know. But I'm wondering in your analysis, whether you're able to tell how the production of administrative data has evolved over time, over decades, because governments have been collecting that data for a long time, and what has been the triggers, because those triggers then, in a way, can inform us what our intervention would look like, what makes the wheel to move. But inside the countries also, I would like to know, were there MDAs and government agencies that seems to be more stronger in producing gender-sensitive information than others? And if so, why? What makes them stronger than the others?
Thank you. I think I'll deviate from questions. I'll just go to comments, and I'll begin by saying my name is Philip Kilonzo. I work with ActionAid Kenya, and I liked the title, Making Every Woman and Girl Count. Counting in terms of what? Counting in terms of statistics of exclusion, or counting in terms of progression? And I think that's where we really need to begin this particular debate. And my thoughts somehow connect a bit with what Esther said, but more fundamentally, that data is it? Because we've always been speaking about data without asking whose data. And if SDGs are going to make sense, then we must begin to look at the transformations that need to occur within the data collection and the kind of data that we are collecting, and how we enhance democracy within the data process. If you take the context of Kenya into account, where the spirit of participation is extremely entrenched, at how do you make women who are excluded to become part of the data, setting of the agenda within the data process, data collection and validation process, and ensuring that they are not part of the statistics of those who are excluded, them being part of the statistics of those who are included. So inclusivity becomes quite key in the implementation of SDG, and therefore the measurement processes must take into account the voice of the women in co-creating the data sets and the data sets that speak to the processes. It is important, I think, at this point in time and in implementation of SDGs, to look at data and its role in implementation, not just data as an end process, but as an embedded element in implementation of SDGs if we want to move to the next level. So basically, those are the quick comments that I just wanted to put on table. My name is Philip Kilonzo. I'm the head of programs, policy, and campaigns for ActionAid Kenya.
I did. I'm Frida. I'm the director of Groots Kenya.
Let me give our colleague from Tanzania, because I think I may be accused for historical marginalization.
So the guideline gives the overall idea of the country's risk, but one observation, because we are talking to whom? The administrative data, so we need more representation during this type of discussion. I don't see anybody from the sectoral ministry to share the experience. So this type of discussion, we need someone to whom we are talking, because we are talking administrative data, but no one representing sectoral ministries. So in this type of conversation, we need to involve more in future. That is one observation. We discussed many issues because this, if you talk about the standards, statistics office, that's the standard one. But if you, they are the keys like this, comparing their quality. So my question from here, what is next? Because starting from MDG, we are talking gap, still it is going. Why it is not happening? That is my question I'm asking to me. So, because what I said, we have to prepare the action plan from here, you know. So otherwise it will be again discussion. And it should be country-specific action plan, because there is discussion that sectoral ministries, they don't have same level of capacity, even the system. So these type of specific actions we need from here if we want to go forward. And there is another key point he discussed, the body. Who is steering the body of this SDG monitoring? That is very important, because if it is the NSO, and they have less control over the sectoral ministries, so it should be either by Prime Minister's office or Planning Commission, or maybe President's office. So there's some good cases in other countries also. Then it is happening. They have control, you know. So that type of action plan, we have to start immediately, country specific. But this gives us just overall idea for what are the challenges. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. And I think I agree with you that the report is meant to first stimulate debate and discussion around these issues, to appreciate and acknowledge the realities within the use of administrative data, particularly in monitoring gender-related SDGs, and also to create a platform for stakeholder partnerships and how we can be able to accelerate progress towards actually ensuring that administrative data take precedence and the standards that we have spoken about are actually brought forward to ensure operationalization of SDGs in terms of monitoring and reporting. Let me give an opportunity to our colleague, Philomena, to respond to some of the issues. I know most of them were inputs, but just touching briefly on the credit on inheritance, I think what the study is envisioning is the fact that the different data that have been collected from different administrative agencies showed the situation is worsening. And because of that evidence, because there's the process of developing policy and law, which then brings stakeholders together, advocacy, and then particular group are able to sort of lead the process. But the evidence is what shows the situation is really bad. What can we do about it? And I think that is what the study is sort of linking to, rather than really meaning that it is the one that probably led to the change of. So that evidence is what we are speaking about, which stimulated the government to be able to see that there's need for change of inheritance, the land, the property law.
Yes.
So, yes.
Okay, thank you so much. I thought I'd say something quickly on the inheritance and the credit and so on that's mentioned by Groot. You know, civil society organizations are our key partners and we don't joke with them. We don't want them not being happy. But I think the clarification from my understanding from the presentation is not giving credit to KNBS, it's giving credit to the use of the data. So it's saying administrative data was used to do the law. That does not mean KNBS is the one who did it. So credit was not being given. Again, I don't want KNBS not being happy. Of course, they collected the data and it is available. They collected the data and it is available for advocates and policymakers to use it. But what was being captured there as a good practice is that you did use data to actually generate inheritance, I mean, whether it was a policy or law. And Jack, you actually said that. And I think that's the correction that I wanted to make. It wasn't saying that law came about because of KNBS. Of course, there's a lot that happened before that would have happened, but it's that data was used actually to advocate or to then include into that inheritance law. That's what I understood from that presentation, and I thought it was important to clarify it. Thank you, Jack.
Yeah. So, Philomena, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. I do agree with Ethiopia that things could have been done better in terms of visiting the countries, but I have explained why that couldn't be done. But in terms of how the case studies were conducted, as I said, I complimented the key informant. I did desk reviews, and I reviewed assessment reports on the SDGs, assessment reports on CRBS, gender reports, and so on. There were many reports that I obtained information from, including the UN assessment report that you spoke about. So all these helped in providing information on the country. The other issue is that even though I did not target each and every MDA, I targeted the NSS coordinators. The NSS coordinators are supposed to coordinate everything that happens within the National Statistical System. And the National Statistical System, it comprises of all the official data collection agencies, including the NSO. And so the assumption is that the coordinator will have an idea of what is happening. The NSOs, in most cases, also obtain data from the different MDAs, for publication. it may not be all. In the case of Ethiopia, the indication was one of the reports indicated that the Ministry of Gender compiles data on gender-specific issues. And now the National Planning and Development Commission leads the SDG indicators. So available documentation were all used to support. I may not have had access to everything. So I agree that those are some of the limitations of the study. So going forward, we'll try and do on-site and in terms of the country-specific recommendations, that would have made the report very long, and so we decided to make it general so that you take which one applies to you. As far as the there was a question on how administrative data has evolved. We did not go into that. What we did was send them questionnaires. What is happening as at now? So tell us what you are doing, how you are doing it, what data types you are producing, and so on, and the challenges that you are facing. So the history was not delved into. I think basically these are the issues that I can respond to. Thank you.
Fatmata, yes, please.
Thank you very much. I took note of other issues that I will, of course, want to add my voice to from the questions and the comments, having been involved in this entire process. Esther, you mentioned a lot around the work on citizen-generated data. It's a big area that we're also working in. I even have to say that the regional director for Isaru, Madam Izedua, is really pushing this complementary data. So you can see from the office, it's really at the top, where we're having a focus and an emphasis on it. That we will have something else before the end of this year. And of course, you're aware that we have partnership with Africa Monitor that is actually collected data from 3 countries, including Kenya, which is some selected SDGs and done a citizen-generated data that has been collected. We had a study already earlier on that has not been launched, that actually was also being done alongside this administrative data to explore the use of citizen-generated data to complement reporting on the SDGs. We are working on guidelines, so there's a lot of work we are doing around that. Just that this workshop, this seminar, we are taught to focus on the official admin, and of course we will have another seminar, the one on citizen-generated data, and those institutions will also be invited. I also hear one thing that I'm happy about from the comments you're raising. It's very good, of course, you're telling us where we fall short of. That's very important. I don't think any one single study will be so comprehensive that does not have 1 or 2 of these. It's almost not possible. Also, the time lag in a study being conducted. Some of the things that will have happened in other countries will have done after we had collected data already. So you may not be able to incorporate that. But of course, that's why it's important to have such a seminar, and we take note of this, even if we do not include in the report as at now, but we are aware of them in terms of our way forward. So that's it. We were also not able to do country visits, several reasons, finance being one of them. And I agree, ideally, doing 6 countries will have been nice to go to the countries, interview all. But that, not only finance, that also takes time. Knowing very well this is an area we are trying to break into, administrative data, citizen-generated data, if you don't do your study quick enough, you actually get left behind. By the time you're doing the study, you spend 2 years and you get something really comprehensive, everybody has already reported in their first 5 years of the SDGs. So timing was also important in terms of the timeliness of the study. I clearly agree with the comment on having the sector ministries who are themselves collecting the admin data. So it just means a replication of this should be considered to have the sector ministry. So I clearly agree. But I think it was also important for us to start with the NSOs first. Because when you get the sector ministries and they are on board, their data will not be used because NSO has not agreed. So it was important for us to get NSOs first, on board, agreeing, and then they refer us. So some of the things that I'm already jotting down in terms of way forward is for us to consider. Again, we have a various list of possible subsectors in which data is being considered, being collected on administrative data. Can we zero in a bit on few of those, on few of the SDGs, and see which country will want to take those up? Even if it means different countries are taking different admin data up to report on the SDGs by the 5 years line, which is next year. So that's something for us to reflect on. It's going to be difficult for us to take the comprehensive social protection data, civil registration, vital statistics, health, education. It's so many of them. It's difficult for all countries to do all of those administrative data and including their SDG reporting. So we should reflect on that, especially the discussion this afternoon that we'll have the NSOs on which administrative data can an NSO take, even if bites a little bit, and for next year we can use that to complement the SDG reporting. I think that would be a big tick for us in terms of how we will have used such a study in influencing the work that we do. So those are the few things I had wanted to add. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you so much, Fatmata and Philomena. And just to also speak on the issue of including persons with disabilities, I think that's an oversight from our end, and we apologize. We are currently, through the EVA program manager, doing actually a situation analysis of engagement of persons with disability in Africa with, of course, select countries. And our regional director is very keen on inclusion as it is, not to ensure that we don't leave any persons or vulnerable populations behind in the implementation of our programming. And this is something that we do take very dearly. And I think that moving forward, we'll ensure that particularly this is actually premised within our activities. I mean, we have done this in several previous activities, but for this particular one, we were not able to reach out to any agency or individuals. So I think that the inputs are very useful. I don't know whether we have a very few minutes. We have 15 minutes. So we can take a quick round. I'll start with there and then come this way, then I come to you, and then we can be able to break some up and break for lunch.
My name is Abigail Chisesa. I work with the Sustainable Development Goals Center for Africa in Rwanda. My question is about, it's been 3 years, the SDGs, since they were launched in 2015. 3 years has elapsed, but we're still talking about that there's no methodology for some indicators. So if we still don't have methodology, and then we're talking about using the administrative data, but there's no methodology for other indicators, how are we planning to make sure that we start collecting? We need to have this methodology for these specific, especially tier 2 and tier 3. So if we don't have the methodology up to now, are we going to achieve these indicators by 2030? That's my worry. As UN, I would like to know, when are we going to have these methodologies, or maybe are we working on a certain framework? Because if countries they'll come up with their own methodologies, it will be different from Malawi, Ethiopia. Each country having a methodology, it will be difficult to compare the indicators from these different countries. Another, it's a comment. So on monitoring the SDGs, the center is working on the monitoring and reporting tool that we are piloting in Ethiopia. We are working with the means of economic planning. As my colleague from Ethiopia mentioned, that the SDGs are being managed by the economic planning. We are working with the means of economic planning. We are almost in the advanced stage where we're about to launch the training soon. We're already done with the country readiness assessment. We're also doing the same pilot in Benin, in West Africa, and also Malawi, in the SADC region. So this monitoring and reporting tool is more or less like harmonizing all the data, the administrative data that is being collected by National Statistical Office, but the country they choose who should be the custodian of this data. For example, for Ethiopia, it's the Ministry of Economic Planning. In Malawi, it's the National Statistical Office. And then in Benin, it's the Ministry of Economic Planning. So we have noticed that each country, they're monitoring these SDGs in a different way, and then they're also harmonizing the indicators in a different way. So we also have to consider that not each and every country is the same as in terms of their priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, Jack, thank you for mentioning the bit about exclusion of disabilities because of the study that you're conducting on women and girls with disabilities. And if there's an opportunity to include that, I'll request that instead of putting it as persons with disabilities, you mention women and girls with disabilities, because this particular study is also looking at making every woman and girl count. The other one is something I noticed on page 71 of the report, table E6, the first indicator. I see Kenya, there's a dash where we are talking about a proportion of population covered by social protection flows or systems. I think for Kenya, or maybe Dr. Philomena can maybe clarify. Page 71. There's no 71? Sorry, is it 61? Yes, 61, sorry. Sorry, 61, table E6, the first indicator, that is 1.3.1. So it reads proportion of population covered by social protection flows, stroke systems, blah, blah, blah. So I'm looking at the first column, Kenya, and I think in terms of a social protection system, Kenya has done something on the age, that is those who are age 65 and above, and also persons with severe disabilities. And then the other one on mothers, maybe colleagues who are working with government sectors can clarify. Linda Mama, I think, is also one of those that is currently working. So I was requesting if Dr. Philomena could clarify why Kenya has a dash, because I think we already have that in existence. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for the report. It will, as we read, it will inform us on many other aspects. Personally, maybe I've not gone through it critically for me to maybe extract some issues. But one of the things I maybe might ask from a report, because I believe this is a living document, is not something that is going to be stored in the shelves. So in a report, because we're also addressing the government and NSOs in government, I don't know whether they already validated this and they own the findings of this report. And if they own the findings of this report, are you going to come up with the mechanism of implementing the recommendations that are targeting the NSOs, the different administrative? Because again, that needs to be monitored so that when we are moving forward, another finding it does not come with the same thing. Because one of the challenges, especially in Africa, we have produced many reports, but they have not seen its implementation because we lack the implementation mechanism. So that needs to be put in place such that this can also work. The other thing that is also important as we're moving forward is also finding a way, because of one thing I've noted in most of work, especially the CSOs and especially the regional-based CSOs, we use a lot of data from the UN agencies, especially Institute of Statistics. So I don't know how NSOs are linked to that, such that the data that is coming from NSOs can feed into United Nations Institute, such that there is no contradiction. It's one data, whatever we find, there is harmonization of data. And that is very important when we are working, especially now that in the same meeting we have just said, data is not the end itself,
but the beginning of working, because for us, the CSOs, we're using this data to come up with interventions, such that when we have the data from NSO and we're quoting from the higher level, it is the same data. And I think that needs to start working together so that we have one data portal that we can all speak to and we can all contribute to. And the other thing that is also very important, and also based on what she said about the CSO contribution, because at some point when Fatmata was presenting, she talked about project level data. So when it comes to project level data, and also we are the CSOs, we work a lot around the project level data. Do we have a unified template that we can all feel such that we can all be recognized to have contributed to a data, and it becomes part of the data that is going to be worked with, and all the element of data in terms of accuracy, in terms of biasness, have been dealt with in that template, and we have one unified template that can all be shared, such that the result, whatever we are advocating, is the same thing as CSOs, as government agency, all the people working around gender issues. We advocate for one thing, and we have a similar source of data that speaks to the one thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This is my second time to speak, so I'll respect that honor. So let me take us very quickly to page 20. Page 20. This is just to illustrate what I talked about earlier about data management. And I can only speak about Kenya because this is where I have experience on. If you look at the completeness of death registration in the study countries, Kenya, it shows that the death registration completeness is 45.6%. This is actually an eye-opener. It's not less than 50%, isn't it? Yet, pardon? 38. Now, let me tell you something. Even if you say 38%, that really is an eye-opener for me, because we know that in this country, you cannot bury anyone without a birth permit, isn't it? Yeah. You cannot bury somebody without a birth permit. A burial permit. You cannot bury somebody without a burial permit. And you also know how it works. My chief in the village, his little briefcase is an office for this little things. You catch him in the church because he knows everybody. He knows who is sick. He knows which family who we are talking about. You say, oh, the old man has left us. We want to bury him. He will remove his briefcase, sign something for you, and give it to you, that little green piece of paper. You go and say, oh, my wife has given birth. I need a birth registration. You'll open his briefcase. He'll give you that little piece of paper. Now, it looks like that little piece of paper is never recorded in another place. It looks like from wherever it is steered from, that's the end of the story. Nobody else knows what has transpired, and I think that is where the problem is. Because if that little piece of paper was recorded properly, who has died, his age, perceived cause of death if he's died at home, and things like all that data is picked, male or female, this death registration would be up to almost over 90%, because clearly you cannot bury anybody without a burial permit. Secondly now, and look at the completeness of birth registration. Of course, there are births which are never registered, but the irony is that the birth registration is higher than the death, yet we expect the other way around. Yeah, because if a baby is born, we are happy. If the chief will find out when he meets a baby on the road, but we try to register whenever we can. But for birth, it's necessary, and there are also individual incentives to register a death. Thank you.
We really appreciate, and I think Fatmata, we need to probably mobilize another study around the role of community leaders, in particularly as it relates to administrative data. I think that would bring really good perspectives around the challenges and how data governance at the community level, which you have passionately shared about, and we appreciate all these inputs. So I want to let me give him the last opportunity, and then I will come to Philomena, then we can close this session.
Okay, thank you. I'm Fakade from Ethiopia. Central Statistical Agency. I would like to add something on the report and the task that this assessment or this report, in the process that this report is produced. I think the statistical capacity in monitoring SDG is very important. When I say the statistical capacity, the number of available or currently available indicators for monitoring this SDG and their corresponding metadata, the definitions and other aspects has to be assessed in order to make strong the reporting mechanism of SDGs, including gender specific SDG indicators. So it could have been good to assess the statistical infrastructures. When I say this one, the statistical infrastructures, it is not buildings, as you know, it is not other technological infrastructures, but the infrastructures with regard to documents, for example, as I have said, the metadata documents, the guidelines, and other definitions, concepts, and related documents has to be assessed, the gaps has to be identified, and the recommendations and other resources has to be allocated so that through time this statistical capacity has to be get stronger. So in the near future, if this assessment is going on, I think this has to be part of the assessment so that countries has to be participated to get their corresponding recommendations to improve their statistical capacity. And this has to be one task in the future assessments. Thank you.
Really appreciate it. So let me come to Philomena and my colleague Fatmata, if they would have any concluding inputs with regard to the inputs, questions, clarifications, and comments from all colleagues.
Okay. Thank you very much. I will go to the question posed by Rwanda regarding the methodologies on Tier 3 indicators. At the time that we were doing the assessment, the 15 indicators, the methodology for assessing the 15 Tier 3 indicators were still ongoing. As of December 2018, only 4 indicators were still lacking either complete methodologies or partial methodologies. So I'm happy to say that we have most of the Tier 3 indicators with standards and methods for compiling them. And I'm hoping that with time, we'll have information or methodological procedures for computing all the Tier 3 indicators. With respect to the question on page 17, indicator 1.3.1, the question is, why does Kenya have a dash? At the time of the data collection, the key informants indicated that those data were not being compiled. And so that's why there's a dash. If the situation has changed, then it's very good. But at the time, the indicator was not being compiled, so there was no, what do you call it? No agency that we could attribute the computation or the compilation of the indicator to. There was a question on whether the report has been validated. I think UN Women will be the right people to answer, but I'm aware that the report was sent to all the countries for their inputs. And there was a proposal to unify templates for data collection. I think that's the way to go. If we are able to share concepts, then we'll have harmonized data at all levels, because what we did is based on officially generated indicators. But we all know that there are data that are generated at the community level which we refer to as the citizens-generated data. If we can have the same concepts and apply to the data collection in the various areas at the community level, and also have the same methodologies for collecting the data, and maybe a unified template to collect the data, that will help us to compare whatever we produce at that level as and at the private, within the private sector, and also at the public sector level. Kenya also raised the issue about the level of the coverage of death registration. It's true that in most areas you cannot bury without a burial permit, but we also know that sometimes when the data are collected, they are not sent to the right places for inclusion in the analysis. So the coverage is poor, and so whatever is available is what is analyzed. We also have some people burying without. If you go to the rural, very remote rural areas, people can bury without birth certificate. So that one too is there. In terms of Ethiopia proposed that it would have been good to assess the statistical infrastructure. This is research for the future, so that may be done when resources become available. Thank you.
Martha?
So I stand up. Yes. Thank you very much, everybody, for the... Oh, we are closing this session. It's Jack's, yeah.
So where's the comment, please? Yes, Beatrice.
It was around the issue that Esther raised. Hello? It's around the issue that Esther raised on social protection in Kenya. I think having a dash, and if government comes across this report, we are in trouble. We have a very strong social protection. We know that even the people that are affected by drought, they actually get 2,000 per month through World Food Program. Anybody who is 70 years old gets money every month nowadays. HIV and AIDS affected population, they are actually covered. People with the disability, under the minister, I think it's the Minister of Labor and Social Protection, a lot of people are actually covered, and therefore, if we put a dash, it might actually bring us a problem. Maybe we can put something that it was not collected, but if it doesn't exist, we would be in trouble. That's what I wanted, just caution.
I don't think we'll be in trouble. If you look at the entire indicator, it's disaggregated by sex, distinguishing children, unemployed, old persons, persons with disability, pregnant. The indicator is so huge that it's not, all of that data is not available. And that data is actually from the NSS, that dash. So it's not even that, the study did not find that out. It got that from a report, and I think that's probably the challenge with some of these indicators. They are so compounded, even the one that you were talking about, homicide, with intent. I mean, how do you distinguish which homicide is intentional or not? So that's why sometimes you see a dash. Some element of the data is available, but not all. So it will still be a dash.
But also I think for this, it's actually looking at the institutional responsibility. Yeah. In terms of who's specific. So as I hand over to Fatmata, I want to thank all participants for your active participation, the very valuable inputs, which we have really noted down. And I look forward to the afternoon session. And thank you so much. So I give it to Fatmata, and then Valentine will tell us where we are going to have lunch. Thank you so much.
Round of applause for Jack and for everyone for this session. A very big round. Bigger than that. People have done very well. It's been very interactive. We've had a lot of ideas, suggestions, and so on. Just few things I want to add. One thing that I know, you don't joke with NSOs for data. If this report was nowhere near what they want, they will not be here. If it was nowhere near what they want, they would not stand there and hold it or take a picture of it. So this report was indeed reviewed by all the NSOs that are here, saying that when you review a document, you raise comments. It is not all of them that are likely to be included in a document. So it is not surprising that you're reiterating some of the points here, because every study itself has its own coverage level. So there are limitations, it cannot extend beyond that. So maybe some of the things you're raising, we did not plan on covering in this particular study, but they give us very good ideas moving forward. So all NSOs have read this document. In fact, before we printed, we ensured that every NSO, because you will be in trouble for an NSO to come and say, we haven't read it. You will not be in trouble that you did not get some information correct. Because again, you're talking to informants, the person who reviewed them maybe is not the one that is here, but it really does have their landmark. I wanted to make that point very clear. Now, one thing I also want to ask you to help me do right now, I know it's almost time for lunch. I want you to write on your version. Please take your pen and paper. I'm actually going to check. On your document, and say launch version. Not L-U-N-C-H, L-A-U-N-C-H. English is not my first language. So not launch, so don't go and eat the report. Write boldly at the top and the inside and say L-A-U-N-C-H version. So this is a version that we printed for us to be able to launch the study. So that if someone sees it and says, the T, I said you didn't cross it and so on, we will know. When we do the crossing and the dots, we will send you the soft copy of that one. And of course, our country offices will get the hard copy as well. Don't miss the afternoon session, because in the afternoon when we come back, we are having a panel discussion with the representatives from the National Statistical Offices. They've been speaking from their individual capacity as technical and specialists. Now we're going to hear from them speaking as NSO. How can we move this forward? So we're really hoping that's going to be another very interactive session. Okay, you have all deserved your lunch, and just before Valentine announces the lunch, I want to say that, have you ever heard about the new restaurant called Karma? We all know what karma is, right? Your karma. Like the things that are destined to happen anyway, yeah? It is life, yeah? So we do have that restaurant here. The only thing about it, there is no menu. You get what you deserve. Enjoy your lunch.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. So lunch will be served at the Delegates Lounge. This is below the main lobby. It's a floor below the main lobby, and it's next to the KCB Bank. Bon appetit. Yes, we are going together, so please follow me. She's here. Who's here?